I never thought I'd be the guy who'd be blindsided like this. But here we are. My name is Dave. I'm 38, an unremarkable guy in a quiet suburban neighborhood. My life was just that. Quiet, unremarkable, but comfortable. My wife, Emily, was beautiful, and not just on the outside. She had this kindness about her, a soft-spoken way that drew people in. And she was mine. We'd been together for 10 years. We'd met when I was still figuring out what I wanted to do with my life. She was a teacher at the local elementary school. We clicked instantly. She was everything I needed, sweet, thoughtful, and there for me when things got tough. Our life was simple. We didn't make a lot of money, but we had our house, a small but cozy 3-bedroom with a backyard, where we could sit outside during the summer nights, drink wine, and talk about our day. It wasn't anything extraordinary, but it was ours, and I was proud of it. Emily and I didn't have many ups and downs. Sure, we had the usual arguments about chores or who was picking up groceries, but nothing too serious. We had a routine. Maybe it wasn't perfect, but it worked. And I was content. Maybe too content. I thought I could trust her. I thought, if nothing else, we had something solid. Something safe. Then came Tom. He was a neighbor next door. He had lived in the house for a while, longer than we had. I never thought anything of it. We exchanged pleasantries, talked about the yard work and the weather, the usual stuff. He was in his late 40s, had that sharp, polished look about him, with slicked back hair and a constant air of confidence. He was a businessman of some sort, although he was never clear about what exactly he did. He didn't have kids, so Emily and I would invite him over for dinner sometimes. He was a pleasant enough guy, if a little too smooth for my liking. But that's just how people are, right? It was an afternoon in late April when everything changed. I had gotten off early from work and thought I'd surprise Emily with lunch. She usually worked from home on Thursdays, so I had the whole afternoon to myself. I was excited to see her. Maybe I could cook us something nice. Make her laugh. We've been a little distant lately. Nothing major, but I could feel the distance. I wasn't stupid. I parked the car in the driveway and made my way up the steps to the front door. I turned the handle and stepped inside, expecting to hear the hum of the TV or the sound of her typing away at her computer. But instead, there was silence. And then, faintly, I heard something else. It was coming from the bedroom. At first, I thought it was nothing. Maybe the TV was on. But then I heard it more clearly. Voices, and a soft, almost rhythmic sound that I couldn't quite place. I froze in the doorway. My heart began to race, but I couldn't move. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew something wasn't right. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just some silly noise, but then it hit me like a freight train. The sounds I was hearing weren't normal. They were intimate. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't breathe. I felt my legs go weak. I had no idea what was going on, but every instinct told me I needed to see what was happening. I had to know. I crept toward the bedroom, each step feeling like 1,000 pounds. I could hear her voice now, soft but unmistakable, and his, Tom's voice, the same Tom who had been my friend, the same Tom I had shared beers with, talked sports with, the guy who always smiled and waved at me from his driveway. No, this couldn't be happening. I reached the door. I was shaking, but I couldn't stop myself. I pushed the door open slightly, just enough to catch a glimpse, and there they were. My wife, naked in bed, tangled with him. Tom looked up first. His eyes went wide for a moment, like a deer caught in headlights. But it wasn't surprise or guilt I saw in his eyes. No, it was a kind of quiet resignation, like this was a game he'd played 100 times before. I heard Emily gasp. Her eyes flickered to me. She didn't move. She didn't say anything. I don't know what I felt first. Rage? Pain? Betrayal? It was like an earthquake was shaking my very soul. I couldn't think, couldn't speak. I just stood there, frozen, watching my life burn to the ground in front of me. Tom scrambled off the bed. He didn't even apologize. He didn't even look sorry. It was like he was putting on his pants in a rush, because it was no big deal. Dave, man, I didn't mean for this to happen, Tom said, his voice low, almost embarrassed, but not the kind of embarrassment that comes from guilt. No, it was like he was apologizing for a small inconvenience. Shut up, I said. It came out barely above a whisper, but the words hung in the air, sharp like knives. Just get out. Both of you. Now. I remember Tom glancing at Emily for a split second before quickly grabbing his shirt and shoes. He didn't need to be told twice. He bolted out of the room, out of the house, like a man on fire. But Emily just sat there. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, as if she hadn't expected this. Maybe she didn't, but I sure as hell did. Dave, she began, her voice trembling. I held up my hand, silencing her before she could go any further. I didn't want to hear her excuses. I didn't want to hear her try to explain it away. There was nothing she could say that would make this right. Why? I managed to choke out. Why, Emily? After everything. After us. She reached for me, but I stepped back. My whole body felt like it was on fire. This moment, this betrayal, was a wound I could never heal. I was lonely, Dave, she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. You've been distant lately. Tom was there for me when you weren't. I didn't mean for it to happen. It was a mistake. A mistake. I repeated, my voice rising. A mistake? You slept with him. You betrayed me. You betrayed us. She didn't respond. She couldn't. There was nothing to say. I didn't know what to feel. My heart was breaking, my chest tight, like a vice was slowly crushing me. But beneath that pain, there was something else. Something cold, something darker. I didn't know it at the time, but I could feel it growing inside me, a hunger, a need for something I couldn't yet put into words. I want a divorce, I said, the words slipping out like they weren't even mine. Her face crumpled, and she reached out, begging me to stay, begging for forgiveness. But I was already walking away. I couldn't look at her anymore. I couldn't hear her anymore. The door slammed behind me as I left. I didn't look back. I didn't know it then, but that moment, that shattering moment, will be the turning point. The place where everything changed. The place where I stopped being just Dave and became something else. Something darker. And Tom. He wouldn't know it yet, but his life was already falling apart. And I was the one holding the strings. I don't know when the first seed of revenge was planted, but I can tell you exactly when it started to grow. The moment I closed the door behind me, leaving Emily sobbing and gasping for words that couldn't undo what had just happened. I don't know how long I stood there in the driveway, staring at the ground, trying to make sense of everything. The sky had started to darken, but it felt like everything around me was numb. My mind was whirling, trapped in a spiral of confusion, pain, and a growing sense of something darker. When I finally started walking away from the house, my first instinct was to drive. Anywhere. I just needed to move, to get away. But the further I drove, the more my mind returned to them. To Tom. To Emily. To the betrayal. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. But I couldn't stop the thoughts from flooding in. I'd been played. Used. And all the while, I had trusted Tom. I had trusted Emily. I thought I was the one who was safe. I thought I was the one who had the life people envied. But it was all a lie. Every single bit of it. I could almost hear Tom's voice in my head. That slimy, casual tone. I didn't mean for it to happen, man. It's like he wasn't even sorry. He wasn't even ashamed. No, he was just smug. He was so confident. Like he'd done this 1,000 times before and nothing was going to stop him. And then, of course, there was Emily. That look in her eyes. The one that said she regretted nothing. She was ashamed, yes, but that wasn't the same thing. She hadn't done this because she felt bad. She hadn't done this because she loved me and couldn't stand to hurt me. No, she'd done it because she was lonely. That's what she said. Lonely. And Tom had been there for her. I didn't know which hurt more, her betrayal or my own gullibility. How had I not seen it coming? How had I been so stupid to think I knew her, to think we were happy? It didn't take long for the anger to build. It crept in slowly at first, like a storm on the horizon, but once it had a foothold, it was relentless. My blood boiled whenever I thought of her face, her excuses, her pathetic tears. And Tom. Tom had taken everything from me. My trust, my dignity, my life. It wasn't enough to be angry anymore. I needed something to make them feel what I felt. I needed them to understand that their actions had consequences. Real consequences. By the time I got home that night, my mind was made up. Revenge wasn't going to be some quick, satisfying burst of anger. It wasn't going to be a single act, a quick slapback. No, this needed to be calculated. I needed to break them. I needed to take everything from them the way they had done to me. I sat at the kitchen table long after I'd finished eating, some half-hearted meal I'd thrown together while my mind raced. But I wasn't hungry. I wasn't even aware of the passing hours. I kept thinking about what Tom had. His life. His house. The life he'd stolen from me. That's when it hit me. His house. That's it. I had to have his house. Tom lived right next door to us. It was a beautiful place, the kind of house people envied. Large, sprawling with big windows, an immaculate yard, and a swimming pool in the back. It had been his pride and joy. He'd worked hard for it. He'd told me, and I believed him. I'd admired it. But I also knew something about Tom. He liked to show off. He liked the idea of having more than other people. I started planning, mentally at first, going over the details in my head. How could I make it happen? What steps would I need to take him down? I started by looking at his finances. I knew he had been in some trouble before, but I hadn't realized how deep the hole went. A few bad investments, credit cards maxed out, and a second mortgage on the house. A close friend of mine worked at the bank, and I managed to have a chat with him. He didn't ask many questions. No one ever does when you're just a guy asking questions about his neighbor. And in the course of an afternoon, I had a solid understanding of Tom's situation. He was in debt, deep in debt. Not the kind of debt you could just walk away from. It was obvious to me that he was struggling, but he kept up appearances. The flashy car, the designer clothes. He wanted everyone to think he was living the dream. But deep down, he was suffocating. It wasn't long before I started making moves of my own. I contacted a real estate agent, one that specialized in selling properties through discreet means. The agent wasn't told who the buyer was. My name didn't appear anywhere. I made an offer on Tom's house. A lowball offer, just enough to rattle him. I knew he'd be tempted to take it, especially with the mounting debt. I wasn't interested in buying the house for myself. Not yet. I didn't want to move into the place. That wasn't the goal. The goal was something more subtle, something more painful. I wanted to own that house because it would give me power over him. I would have leverage. I would make him feel what it was like to lose everything. But I needed to make it hurt. I needed to bleed him dry. I hired a lawyer who specialized in real estate transactions and LLCs. I didn't want Tom to know who was behind the offer until it was too late. Everything needed to be clean, above board. The moment the deal was struck, I wanted to ensure there was no way to undo it. And then, once the house was mine, I planned the real blow. I'd evict him. Not only would I take away his house, but I'd also destroy the one thing that kept him afloat, his status, the reputation he so clearly cared about. I couldn't wait to see his face when the eviction notice arrived. As the plan began to take shape, the sense of calm came over me. It was like the storm in my mind had finally settled. This wasn't just about punishing them for their betrayal. It wasn't just about getting back at Emily for the affair. No, this was about justice. It was about balance. The world had wronged me, and now I was going to make sure that I righted the scales. The pieces were falling into place. I was ready. The days leading up to the moment I knew everything would change felt like a slow descent into something darker. The planning was done, the pieces set in place, but I could feel the tension in the air. I hadn't slept properly in days. I hadn't eaten properly either. My mind was consumed by thoughts of revenge, and the sense of power that came with it made me feel like I could do anything, like I was untouchable. It wasn't until the morning the deal went through that I truly realized the weight of what I was about to do. Tom's house, the one he'd worked so hard for, the one that had become a symbol of everything he thought he was, it was mine now. I had the papers in my hand, the legal deed to his life. The familiar scent of fresh paper and ink had never smelled so sweet. It wasn't a victory yet, not entirely, but it was the first taste. I stood in my living room, looking out at Tom's house through the large bay window. His big, perfect home with the pristine lawn, the expensive car parked in the driveway, and the tall hedges that made it look like his own little fortress. That house, I realized, was an extension of his ego. It was more than just bricks and mortar. It was his identity. The first step was simple: make the offer. I had already convinced him that he was in too deep financially to walk away. The debt, the loans, the hidden mess behind his pretty little house, all of it. He'd take my offer. He had to. I wasn't in a hurry to pull the trigger on the eviction, though. I wanted to savor it. I wanted to watch him squirm, feel the ropes tighten. He had no idea yet what was coming. His arrogance had blinded him. Tom had a way of making people think he was untouchable. He wasn't. I was untouchable now. The morning the papers went through, I went straight to the real estate agent, the one who had brokered the deal. I didn't care about any of the formalities. I wanted the house in my hands, and the sooner I could make the switch, the sooner I could begin my next move. The agent handed over the keys. My hands felt cold when I took them, but my mind was on fire. Then came the phone call to my lawyer. I needed him to draft the eviction notice. I didn't care how long it took or how much it cost. I needed it to be official, thorough, and absolutely undeniable. The eviction would be served on Tom as soon as possible. And then I waited. I sat back in my chair, the weight of my actions pressing down on me. But instead of feeling remorse, instead of feeling the emptiness that people warned me about, I felt a sense of clarity, a sense of cold, calculated precision. What had been done to me was irreversible, but now I would be the one holding the reins. The world was starting to look like it was falling into place. The call came in that afternoon. The eviction notice had been served. It was perfect. I didn't see him immediately, but I could feel it coming. I knew what would happen next. He'd come over, try to negotiate. He'd be angry, maybe desperate, but ultimately powerless. There was nothing he could do. I had already made the call to the bank to ensure that the paperwork was watertight. No loopholes. No second chances. At 6 p.m., I heard the knock on my door. I opened it slowly, expecting a confrontation. Sure enough, there stood Tom, his face flushed with rage and confusion. "Dave," he said, the tone of his voice sharp, almost pleading. "What the hell is this? What the hell is going on? You can't just do this." I didn't even flinch. I didn't need to. The power was in my hands now. "I can," I said, my voice colder than I intended. "I already have. You don't get to be untouchable, Tom. Not anymore." He stepped forward, trying to control the panic in his voice. "This is my house. You can't just take it from me. I've worked for everything I have. This is unfair." "I didn't do anything to you, Tom," I said, almost as if I were speaking to a child. "You did this to yourself. You and Emily. I'm just following through." He stopped short, and for the first time I saw it. The cracks in his armor. The hint of fear in his eyes. "You think you're making me pay for what happened between you and her, don't you?" he asked, voice low. I could feel a smile tug at the corner of my lips, but I didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing it. "That's part of it. The other part is that you thought you could walk around acting like you were better than everyone else. But you're not, Tom. You're just like the rest of us. And now, I'm taking everything you thought you had." For a moment, there was silence. His eyes flickered between anger and fear, and it was almost like he was struggling to find the words that would change everything. "You can't take this from me, Dave," he said, his voice cracking. "I'll fight you. I'll get a lawyer. I cut him off, knowing that this was his last attempt at controlling the situation. "It's already done. You can fight all you want, but you'll lose. Just like you lost when you chose to sleep with my wife." The words tasted bitter, but they were true, and hearing them out loud made me feel powerful. In control. Tom's face twisted in anger, but there was nothing he could do. I wasn't afraid of him. Not anymore. "Get out of my sight," I said, my voice final. "You've got 30 days to vacate the property. I'll be expecting you to honor the terms of the agreement." He stood there for a moment longer, as if waiting for me to show a hint of doubt. But I didn't. I turned my back on him, leaving him standing in the doorway, stewing in the aftermath of his failure. The next few weeks were a strange blur. The satisfaction of seeing Tom's life crumble before him felt almost hollow. I had taken his house. I had exacted my revenge. But what did it mean? Was this enough to erase the pain? The betrayal? No, it wasn't. But it was something. I watched from my window as Tom moved out. His things were packed into a rented truck, and for the first time, I saw the true weight of it on his face. His confidence had vanished, replaced by a hollow emptiness. He had been the one in control for so long, and now, he was nothing more than a man on the run. It wasn't the victory I had imagined. It wasn't the catharsis I thought I'd feel. Instead, I was left with a strange sense of emptiness. The revenge had been executed perfectly, but it hadn't filled the hole inside me. And that's when I realized, revenge, for all its satisfaction, is a poison. It can make you feel strong in the moment, but the aftermath? It doesn't give you the closure you want. It doesn't make you whole again. Still, as I watched Tom's belongings disappear from the house he'd once called home, I couldn't help but smile. He had nothing left. Nothing but the consequences of his choices. And I was still standing. It's strange, isn't it? How we expect revenge to be this final thing. A moment where everything is tied up, where you can look at your enemy and see their defeat, their downfall, and feel good. Feel like the scales have finally balanced. The demons that haunted you in your darkest hours would vanish, and everything would be right in the world again. That's what I thought, anyway. But as I watched Tom's last box of belongings disappear into the moving truck, a sick feeling gnawed at my stomach. I'd done it. I had taken everything from him. I had watched his life crumble. His house, his reputation, his pride, all of it was gone. And yet, the emptiness didn't fade. The hollow feeling that had grown inside me didn't disappear. If anything, it had gotten worse. For days after the eviction, I couldn't shake the sensation of having lost something. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. It wasn't guilt, exactly, but something deeper, something darker. I had been so sure of my plan, so sure that taking Tom's house, his status, would make everything right. But now that it was done, it didn't feel like justice. It felt like a hole inside of me had only grown deeper. Emily didn't call. She didn't show up at my door, begging for forgiveness like I expected. She didn't do anything. It's like she knew her time was over, like she had nothing left to offer. I wanted her to fight for me. I wanted her to show up and apologize, to beg for us to somehow salvage what was left. But she didn't. I realized, somewhere deep down, that she had never really cared about me. Not in the way I had thought. She had been looking for an escape, looking for someone who could fill a void I wasn't aware existed. And now, she was gone. For good. I saw her only once after the eviction, at the courthouse, when the divorce papers were finalized. Her eyes were swollen, and she avoided my gaze the entire time. I tried to feel something, anger, pain, anything, but I couldn't. It was like she had been erased from my life. Just another shadow that no longer mattered. Tom, on the other hand, had vanished entirely. No phone calls, no visits. He wasn't even answering the phone when I tried to get him to explain himself, to explain why he'd done it, why he'd betrayed me the way he had. It wasn't like the movies, where the villain gets their final speech, where they stand there and justify their actions, where they give you the satisfaction of hearing them grovel. No, Tom had slunk away into the shadows, and I knew he wasn't coming back. But there was one last thing I needed to do, something I hadn't thought about until after I had taken everything from him, something I hadn't counted on. I had made enemies, people who had seen my revenge, people who had seen the way I had destroyed someone's life, and the way I had used the system to do it. People who had watched the devastation unfold and knew I wasn't someone to mess with. It didn't take long before rumors started to swirl about me. There were whispers, people questioning whether I had crossed the line. And sure, I'd always known that revenge could have consequences, but I didn't think it would happen so soon. I hadn't realized it, but I had made myself a target. The police started to visit the house more often. They came to ask questions about how I had acquired Tom's property so quickly. They came to make sure everything was on the up and up. I wasn't breaking the law, but I could feel their eyes on me, the suspicion in the air. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind me that I was never going to be truly safe in the aftermath of my actions. And then, of course, there was the matter of my reputation. Some of my friends started pulling away, not saying anything outright, but the silence was deafening. No one called to check in. No one asked how I was doing. It was like the social fabric around me had unraveled. I thought I'd feel triumphant. I thought I'd walk around with my head held high, knowing that I'd taken everything from those who wronged me. But it wasn't like that. It was isolating, empty. I tried to keep myself busy, burying my head in work, fixing up Tom's old house. I had grand plans for the place, renovations, changes, new furniture. But the truth was I didn't care about it. The house didn't make me feel any better. It just made me feel more alone, more distant. I remember one night, sitting alone in the kitchen, sipping a glass of bourbon. The lights were low, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator in the background. I stared out the window into the backyard, at the space where Tom's once perfect lawn had been. The weeds were already starting to take over. There was no more manicured lawn, no more pool parties. It was just a piece of land, a house full of memories, and a man who had taken everything from someone else. I didn't feel satisfied. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt empty. The thing about revenge is that it's a slow burn. It doesn't give you the closure you expect. The high you get from watching your enemy fall doesn't last long, and when it fades, all you're left with is the wreckage. You don't come out of it clean. You don't come out of it fixed. And what about Tom? What about Emily? Had I truly taken everything from them? Or Had I just given them a reason to hate me? A reason to disappear and never look back? I didn't know the answers yet. I didn't know if I ever would. But I could feel the change inside me. I could feel it eating away at me. Revenge had changed me. I had crossed a line I could never uncross. And now, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. Time moves in strange ways when you're stuck in the aftermath of your own decisions. It's almost as if the clock starts to blur, the minutes morphing into hours, the days into weeks. You think you're moving forward, but the truth is, you're still living in the wreckage. You're walking through your life, but your mind is trapped in the moment when everything changed. I had a routine now, but it was hollow. It was mechanical. I went to work, came home, and tried to occupy myself with the house, with the renovations, with things that no longer mattered. I kept the blinds shut, the curtains drawn. I didn't want to see anyone. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I was alone in a world I had created. The house was quiet, so quiet. It was the kind of quiet that seeps into your bones, the kind of stillness that makes you wonder if you've already begun to vanish. I was living in the aftermath of a victory, but it wasn't a victory anymore. It was a hollow shell, a lifeless thing that I had built around myself. I had taken Tom's house. I had taken everything from him. But in the process, I had lost something too. I had lost myself. It's funny how something that starts out as an act of retaliation can morph into something much worse. Revenge is supposed to be satisfying. It's supposed to give you this sense of power, this sense of control. But what they don't tell you is that once you've taken that power, it doesn't give you anything in return. It doesn't fill the hole you thought it would. I hadn't spoken to Emily in months. I didn't even know where she was anymore. I hadn't tried to find out. I told myself I didn't care. But every once in a while, when I'd catch myself lost in thought, I'd wonder, did she think about me? Did she ever regret what happened? Did she miss me the way I missed her? But that was just the thing. I didn't miss her. Not really. What I missed was the idea of her, the life I thought we were building, the person I thought she was. That person was gone now, and in her place was someone I didn't recognize, someone who had betrayed me in ways I hadn't even known were possible. And then there was Tom. He was gone, completely, not even a whisper. He had taken his shame, his guilt, and his life with him. I had broken him, but I hadn't broken him in the way I thought I would. He hadn't come to me, begging for mercy. He hadn't crumbled at my feet. He just disappeared, and maybe that was the worst thing of all. He was gone. I thought, at first, that this was what I wanted, that his life would be reduced to rubble, that he'd walk away with nothing, and I'd feel this rush of satisfaction. I imagined him wandering through the streets, destitute, begging for someone to listen to his side of the story. But that didn't happen. He didn't beg. He didn't fight. He just left. And me? I was left alone. I had his house, but it felt like an anchor around my neck. The house was empty, and I was the only one in it. There were no celebrations, no champagne, no sense of victory. I had destroyed a man, but in the process, I had destroyed myself too. I began to realize that revenge had taken me down a path that I didn't know how to get off. It wasn't just that I had hurt others. It was that I had lost myself. The person I used to be, the man who believed in second chances, who trusted others, who believed that things could always be fixed. He was gone. I couldn't remember what it felt like to trust anyone. I couldn't remember what it felt like to hope for anything. All I had now was emptiness. It was around 6 months after Tom had left that I started getting phone calls. At first, I didn't pick up. I didn't care. But then the calls became more frequent, persistent. I was at work one afternoon when I saw a number I didn't recognize flashing on my screen. I picked up, ready to hang up the moment I realized it was someone trying to sell me something, but the voice on the other end made me stop. Dave. The voice was shaky, almost nervous. Yeah. I replied, trying to place it. It's Emily. I need to talk to you. I froze. Her name felt like a cold stone in my stomach. She had no right to call me, no right to ask for anything. But there was something in her voice, something I couldn't quite place, that made me pause. What? I asked, the bitterness seeping through the cracks I had worked so hard to hide. Because I don't know what else to do, Dave, she said, her voice cracking. I've been living in this nightmare. And I need you to know something. I didn't want any of it. I never meant to hurt you. But Tom, he wasn't the man I thought he was. Stop. I interrupted, the anger rising in my chest. I don't need to hear it. You lost that right the moment you slept with him. You don't get to explain yourself now. There was silence on the other end for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was smaller. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Dave. I'm asking for closure. I've lost everything, and I don't know how to move on. I need you to know that I'm sorry, and that I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to scream at her, wanted to tell her that nothing she said could undo what had been done. But another part of me, the part that was buried deep beneath the anger, the part that remembered the love we had shared, that part of me wanted to reach out and tell her that I forgave her, that I understood. But I couldn't. I couldn't because the person who had once believed in second chances, he was gone. That man had died the moment I watched them together. That man had died when I decided to tear down everything Tom had. That man had died the moment I chose revenge over peace. I don't know what you want from me, Emily, I said, my voice low. I've already made my choice, and it's too late for anything else. I hung up before she could say anything else. I didn't feel better afterward. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel anything, really. But there was something in her words that haunted me. That image of her, broken and regretful, stayed with me long after the phone call ended. Maybe she had been truly sorry. Maybe she had suffered. But the truth was, I had suffered too. I had lost myself in the process. And so I sat in my empty house, staring at the walls, knowing that I had exacted my revenge, but that the cost had been far greater than I could have ever imagined. Revenge doesn't give you the satisfaction you crave. It doesn't heal you. It doesn't fix the things that are broken inside. In the end, all you're left with is the wreckage of your own choices. And no matter how much you try to tell yourself otherwise, you can't undo it. You can't go back. You just have to live with it.